We start hearing from our panelists. I want to introduce a bit more about what disability justice means and why we're here today. Disability justice is a social justice movement which focuses on examining disability and ableism as they relate to other forms of oppression and identities such as race, class, and gender. The term disability justice was developed in 2005 by the Disability Justice Collective, which was started by a team of queer disabled women of color, Patty Byrne, Mia Mingus, and Stacy Milburn in the San Francisco Bay Area. They started this movement in reaction to their exclusion from the mainstream disability rights movement and disability studies discourse, as well as because of the ableism in activist spaces. Disability justice emphasizes that ableism makes other forms of prejudice possible and that systems of oppression are intertwined. We academics have a responsibility to acknowledge and address the various systems of oppression that exclude marginalized groups from grad school and careers in higher education, including ableism. We're here today to listen to disabled disability advocates who are current or recent graduate students in the US and who understand the various ways that ableism intersects with racism, sexism, homophobia, and other forms of discrimination. The breakout rooms were conceived first as a space for disabled students and educators to speak up and share, and second for their non-disabled colleagues to listen, learn, and ask questions. And we will use feedback from disabled attendees today to develop informational resources for educators and new policies to advocate for at universities across the US. So we're now going to hear from, briefly from each of our panelists for about 30 minutes before we go into the breakout rooms. And each of the panelists is going to answer the following questions. Who are you and what do you study? What do you wish people knew about what it's like to be a higher ed student with your disability? And what is one change that we should make to the academic system that would improve the higher ed experience for students like you? Our first panelist is Terry Lynn Kane, who is a PhD candidate at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital Graduate School and who will later lead a breakout room called Accessibility, Seeing Grad School Differently. Can we spotlight Terry?
Hi, so as Rachel said, I'm Terry Kane, PhD student in biomedical sciences at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I'm currently studying sort of bone marrow interactions in sickle cell disease, with the idea being that hopefully I can sort of study this and create better sickle cell disease therapies or patient outcomes. So I should also mention, before I forget, that I have oculocutaneous albinism, and therefore I have low vision associated with my albinism. I'd also like to mention some other intersectionalities. So I'm also the first person in my family to go to and graduate from college, and I come from a low socioeconomic background, and I also come from rural parts of the South. I think one thing that I wish people knew is that masking your disability becomes such an ingrained part of being a disabled academic, that sometimes even when people ask you, how can we help, what can we do, it may take a bit of back and forth in order to really be able to have constructive conversations. And one thing that I think that could better improve people, at least from my experience, one thing that could improve being a low vision scientist in academia would be better access to accessibility options, be it through greater funding to support unique equipment that is needed by people with low vision, or even just being more flexible in the kinds of accommodations that are offered. And I'm really excited to speak to everyone today. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Terry. Our next speaker is Maureen Sibert-Gaters, who is a part-time lecturer and part of the GEPN program at the Yale School of Nursing. She'll lead a breakout room later called Black Girls Don't Get ADHD, Stigma and Diagnosis Barriers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maureen Sibert-Gaters. Thank you so much, Rachel, for the invitation and for hosting this. This is incredible. Like I said, my name is Maureen. I am a researcher of infertility, specifically in Black women. And I was diagnosed with ADHD during my first year, going into my second year of my PhD program. And it's been a very interesting experience having essentially had ADHD since I was a child, but going undiagnosed. One thing I definitely wish would change in higher education, especially with those with ADHD, similar to what Terry said, just the accommodations. It can be very difficult, especially for a newly diagnosed person, to go through that paperwork, and kind of wish offices allowed opportunities to kind of do that paperwork together, just to make sure it's done accurately, because it's been a challenge. You do it, and of course you've missed some minor, fine detail, part because of your diagnosis, part because of the ways that the applications are set up, and it sets you back from actually accessing your accommodations. And so thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Our next panelist is Uma R. Chatterjee, who is a neuroscience MS student at the University of Texas, Dallas, and a mental health peer specialist. She'll lead a breakout room later called Grad School and Mental Illness, OCD, PTSD, Depression, and more.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And it's so great to be here with everybody. I wish I could join everyone's breakout rooms. And to briefly introduce myself, my name is Uma. I am a non-traditional student. I am a neuroscience master's student graduating in 3 months and starting a PhD program in the fall. I study the neurobiology of psychiatric disorders like OCD and PTSD, their comorbidity, and the role that psychedelics play on a neurobiological level. I am also a board certified mental health peer specialist. I am the founder of the Cancer Thriver Collective. I am a global advocate for the International OCD Foundation. I'm a director of the Intercollegiate Psychedelics Network, and I'm the host of the podcast, A Chat with Uma. But above all, what underpins everything I do and how I show up in this world is I am a human being living with several conditions and disabilities that have shaped my life and my academic career. I live with young adult cancer, several chronic illnesses, and of course, what I'm talking about today, mental illnesses. I live with OCD, PTSD, major depressive disorder, and many more things. And also mentioning intersectionalities, I am the child of immigrants, a second-generation immigrant. I am a South Asian presenting woman. And a lot of my experience has been shaped from just a lack of access and awareness of mental illness or physical illness and treatment, let alone now navigating accessibility and awareness in graduate school and beyond. So one thing I wish would be known about people with disabilities, and specifically with mental illnesses, is that disabilities and needing accessibility does not disqualify us for being worthy of being in graduate school or being here. They're also not a choice, even when they're invisible and not visible to people. And we belong here because of who we are, not in spite of who we are. And something I would love to see change in graduate school, in the space in general, is just not holding the necessity of accessibility or accommodations or anything related to supporting us as we are in the space against us as grad students in our trajectories, and just really working on deconstructing the ableism from the ground up in terms of even starting with disclosure and starting on the process of receiving the accommodations that are life-saving for so many of us. And as much as there are so many outward-facing initiatives and ways of wanting to act like we are inclusive, I would really, this is really simple, but I'd really love for it to actually be integrated into the systems we have and to actually make a difference for people rather than just talking about it. So I'm so grateful that we are all here to speak about our experiences, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Uma. All right, our next speaker is Rashira Dobson, who is a qualitative researcher at the National Center of Primary Care at Morehouse School of Medicine, and who later will lead a breakout room called Life Goes On, Surviving Academia with Chronic Illness.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Rashira Dobson, or good afternoon to those of you who are on the East Coast. I'm a little mixed up with my time because I'm from Atlanta, but I decided to travel to the West Coast. I'm in LA right now, so I actually don't know what time it is, so just hello to everyone. But as they said, I'm Rashira Dobson. I'm a Black woman, and I'm wearing a green sweatshirt or sweater, and my hair is cut short. And so I recently graduated last year with my MPH, Master's in public health. And so I'm kind of on the other side of my graduate school experience, but that was a very interesting experience. And so I'm really excited to talk today and have this conversation and what it's like being a person of color in a graduate school setting, being a first generation student in a graduate school setting. One of the things that I hope that we're able to learn and speak to from this conversation is how people with disabilities in graduate school education, that our support goes more than, it goes past accommodations and accessibility. How a lot of students with disability, many of us are in the first in our families to go to college or to even get an advanced degree. And so how that support should translate also into emotional and mental health support. When I was a graduate student, I experienced a lot of anxiety that was unrelated to my disability, but more so related to a lot of the stigma within my institution that I just did not anticipate and was not prepared for. And so one of the things that I'm constantly advocating now, especially that I had the privilege of being able to work now at my school as a researcher, doing research around advancing health equity in underserved communities. One of the things I always advocate for is to continue to build a pipeline in which we're providing more support and access for students who also have disabilities, especially BIPOC students with disabilities, because it's definitely an area that is not really touched at all, especially on HBCU campuses. So bringing more visibility and representation and giving students a space to openly disclose their disability status without having to worry about fear of punishment or stigmatization. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into this conversation, and I'm just loving everyone else and what they're bringing. And I think this is just a really powerful precedence that we're standing, that people with disabilities not can only go to college, but we can be like, have advanced degrees, we can be doctors, we can be scientists, which I will say, I did not know this before I got my master's degree. So just being in a room with everyone else is also affirming with me that I'm not alone in this space and that we're doing this work together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rashira. All right, next we go to Lauren Harris, who's an audiology doctoral student at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, and who will lead a breakout room discussion on hearing loss and a life with no limits.
Hey everybody, I know she just said my name, but I'm Lauren Harris. I'm actually in Knoxville, Tennessee right now. So good afternoon from my end and good morning if you are on the other side. I was actually born profoundly deaf and have bilateral cochlear implants, and I graduate this May from my doctorate program. So very, very close to being done with all of my schooling that I've ever done in my entire life. But I can certainly attest to having barriers put up within the graduate school system and having to MacGyver ways to fulfill my accommodations to how they would help me, because I think it's really important to know that each person is an individual person and all of their needs are unique to themselves. And there's no one set list of accommodations that's going to be the best fit for everybody. Everybody's got a unique journey that they go on. And I think that's something that's really important. And I also, really believe that's important, that your disability does not limit you at all whatsoever. I think it's actually a gift in some ways because it can give you a different perspective on life and how you can navigate different scenarios, different areas. You can have the ability to take your implants or your hearing aids off, or, take something away that other people have to keep on all the time. And I really do believe that, we have a purpose and we are able to use our experiences for the greater good and to be able to help other individuals that may not feel like they have someone on their team. And I think it's really important to make sure everybody's heard, everybody's seen, everybody knows that they can accomplish anything that they set their minds to, hence the life with no limits. I don't believe my hearing loss limits me at all whatsoever. However, some people in my graduate program did feel like my hearing loss was something that was going to limit me and tried everything they could to show that it would. And that's something I think should change in terms of higher academia and even lower academia. A lot of people have this stereotype that's ingrained into their brain. And when they find that they have someone that has vision impairment, hearing loss, regardless what it may be, ADHD, anxiety, they want to put them in a little box and say, this is all you can do. This is the only thing that you can do. And I think it's really important to show that we don't have to stay in the box. We can accomplish anything. We can be a scientist, we can be an audiologist, we can be a doctor, you name it. If you want to be an astronaut, you can be that too. But there is no limit to what you can do. The only limit is yourself. And I think that's really important to know, that your perspective on your disability can be groundbreaking to your life and to other lives. Let me make sure I got all the questions. One thing I would change is I wish people would be more open-minded rather than, placing the stereotype on ourselves based on other experiences they've had with other people with that same disability or disabilities in general, and have that open mind of you as an individual, because you are not your disability at all whatsoever. That is not a defining factor for you. You are your own unique individual, and you have your own life to live. So thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to talk to everybody, and I wish I could go into all the breakout rooms. So are awesome.
Thank you, Lauren. Our next speaker is DRC Charrington Neal, who is a PhD candidate in English and Disability Studies at The Ohio State University, who will lead a breakout room later called Disembodied Mobility. And DRC is joining us from Asia, where it's 2 in the morning, I believe. So thanks, CRC.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Rachel. Hi, everyone. So as Rachel said, my name is DRC. And yeah, I'm in Asia because OSU gave me a fellowship for the year and I didn't want to stare at the wall in Ohio. So yeah, as she said, I'm a PhD candidate in English and Black Disability Studies. And I, on top of having other types of disabilities, I also have spastic diplegic cerebral palsy. And I am the only visibly disabled person that has been in any of my programs at 5 universities, and this is my 7th and last degree. So primarily the reason why I put together the breakout room is because a lot of people assume, because of the way that graduate school is constructed, that disability is mostly invisible, and that everybody who's in it, the accommodations and the things required are mostly invisible based on the types of people who go. And while I recognize that that's probably somewhat like 2/3 of the world's disability, I think that it's an entirely different conversation if you have a disability that is visible, because it can shape absolutely everything from whether you can access the room to how here I am as a PhD student on the other side, and I teach students, and the moment I come up in the room, everybody is like, "Ooh," and everybody's already judging you before you even said anything, because you don't have the ability to disclose or hide anything. And that's made teaching really complicated. It's made doing work really complicated. And, I've studied abroad in London and Germany, and just the amount of questions and the confusion that I get from people who they're usually like, why would you attempt to do something like this, as though I'm not allowed to? So primarily that's the reason why I'm here, is just to kind of talk about what it looks like when you don't have the option of disclosure and how to navigate that, on top of obviously being a racial minority, and the fact that, for example, in grad school, I think there are only 10% of grad students are Black, and only 2% of them are men. So it's after watching the Twitter thread and seeing the person who asked, name the last time you had a Black male teacher, and the 8 million responses, 90% of which were never, tells me everything that I need to know. But it's also very evident as to why, I want to be able to have this conversation, and, I'm just grateful and excited to be here. In terms of things that I wish would change, I just wish that there was an actual network for people. I mean, this room is fantastic. I can't say I've ever, in the almost 20 years I've been in school. No, I've been in school over 20 years, and I've never been in a room like this. So this by itself is already what I wish existed. I just wish that it was something that was standard and made common in a way that was seen and not always underground. So thank you.
Thank you so much, DRC. We're so happy to have you here. Our next speaker is Ali Putnam, who's a PhD candidate in organismic and evolutionary biology at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, who will speak later in a breakout room on being immunocompromised or immunosuppressed during a global pandemic.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I feel really honored and humbled to be among such incredible advocates here and to be able to participate. As said, my name is Ali Putnam. I'm a non-traditional student, a first-generation college student, having gone to undergrad college later in my life as a mom with 2 kids. I'm now a 4th-year PhD candidate in the organismic and evolutionary biology program at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. I'm a marine ecologist who uses a combination of manipulative laboratory and field experiments, field monitoring, and synthesis and statistical modeling to better understand how climate change is impacting coastal marine systems. I have Crohn's disease and central nervous system demyelinating disease, which is a bit like multiple sclerosis, but different, both of which are fairly invisible disabilities that have significant impact on my life and my day-to-day, and in itself leaves me immunocompromised. In addition, given the severity of my conditions, I receive strong immunosuppressant medication to essentially turn off my immune system, which attacks my own body, which puts me at a different type of risk, especially given the current state of public health. I think many of us can relate to wishing that others understood that our disabilities and chronic health can vary from moment to moment, day to day, and even year to year. So our ability to manage our research and our education, as well as our productivity, can fluctuate. Our disability often is not linear or static, and therefore neither is our experience with the world around us. Particularly as an immunocompromised individual, I'd like others to know, that their actions or precautions or lack thereof can have significant impact on people beyond themselves and those around them. A cold brought into the laboratory because we have to get work done might be a slight annoyance to the person who has the cold, but that cold can actually be really deadly for those who are immunocompromised and sharing that same space with them. There are so many changes that need to happen for our academic system. But one thing that I think about that would improve higher education for students like myself is the fast-paced nature of conducting scientific research and publishing. That saying, publish or perish statement, which means that you have to push yourself to work as hard and as fast as you can and beyond sometimes your limitations, so that you can continuously publish papers to get or keep your job or to stay relevant. I think oftentimes folks like myself need more flexibility in both the short-term day-to-day, but also the long-term timeline. And so if we have just as important and relevant scientific contributions, but we often experience delays given these day-to-day, moment-to-moment, and even year-to-year changes with ourselves. So I think that if we could change the mindset and the culture of this particular issue, among the many issues that we've heard even described in the last 20 minutes, we'd have a more equitable playing field. So I'm excited to talk more about immune system issues, both being immunocompromised and being immunosuppressed in STEM and higher education in our breakout room. And again, thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful.
Thank you so much. All right, and our next panelist is Nathan Waugh, who has an MS in biochemistry and biophysics from Oregon State University and is a union officer and activist in CGE 6069. And they will lead a breakout room called Chronic Pain, Is Grad School Supposed to Hurt This Much?
Hi, thank you for the introduction, Rachel. And as many have said, thank you everyone for putting this together. As others have mentioned, this is the first time in my life I've ever seen a room like this. So this is really fantastic. And I hope this kind of thing becomes very regular. So yeah, my name is Nathan Wah. My pronouns are they, them, han. And I graduated last year with an MS in biochemistry and biophysics. So I was actually in grad school for 7 years and joined as a PhD student. And actually completed most of my PhD requirements, but due to, due to a large amount of structural barriers related to my disabilities and, various forms of discrimination that are just ever persistent, and then the compounding issues that COVID has generated for disabled people, I eventually it was too much for me. So I just finally said, okay, even though I only have my thesis left to complete, I'm going to a master's and getting out of here because I just physically can't handle it anymore. As for my disabilities, I have multiple disabilities that are both genetic and autoimmune, and they drive a large amount of chronic pain that I experience. And so I'll be talking about chronic pain in the breakout room that I'll be in later. I think one thing I would like people to know about chronic pain, because this is often just sort of not understood, is that the chronic pain means it's different for different people, but for me, it means I'm literally always in pain. So I have sort of a baseline pain level, which on a 0 to 10 scale, I would say is usually around a 3 is my baseline. And what that's like that I try to describe to people is if you stub your toe really hard in the middle of an experiment that you're doing, and you just get that shock of pain that really distracts you. If you take that pain and then just sort of keep it there just all the time, and maybe it goes to different body parts sometimes, maybe sometimes you stub your neck instead of your toe, right? That's the kind of thing that chronic pain is like, and that's before you even get into flare-ups that can be completely debilitating. I've spent multiple days in bed before, unable to function because of chronic pain. And because pain is not visible, this is readily dismissed by many people. I had a former advisor who dismissed my experiences as essentially all in my head. There have been times where I would come into lab and say, sorry for being out the last several days. And I actually had an advisor say, when I said that I was sick for several days, they said, sick with what? Laziness and stupidity. So this is sort of like what my grad experience was like. And I think that it's unacceptable and no one should be put through this kind of stuff. And as someone else said earlier, I can't remember who exactly it was, but we are all, human beings first. And I wish that would be kept in mind. As for one thing that I would change about the academic system to improve life for people with chronic pain or other disabilities, I thought a while about how to answer this one because there's so many things I could say, but I think for me, the most fundamental one, which won't be a surprise to anyone who knows me, is we need to completely eliminate the influence of capitalism on higher ed. So, the profit motive and exploitation of labor drives everything we do. It drives the number of students that are enrolled, even if there are too few grads or professors to teach. It drives the kind of research that we do and the timeline expectations for that research, because the Department of War wants its next weapon plans to be created or whatever. So, capitalism is at the heart of a lot of the oppression that we experience, and that's because it's inherently exploitative, and that means it's inherently ableist, among other forms of bigotry and discrimination. And I think something we can all do to address the influence of capitalism on our academic work in the near term is to become involved in unions. So if you have a grad union, join it. If you're not a member, become a member today, and don't wait, just sign up as a member now. There's not that many grad unions in the US currently, so if you have one, you're lucky. Please take advantage of that. If you don't have a grad union, help organize one. It's doable. There's a lot of schools right now that are forming grad unions. I know there are people in this room who are helping form grad unions. So, there's lots of opportunities. Unions help mitigate a lot of the damage that capitalism does to individual communities. So that would be my one recommendation. Yeah, I think that was what I had to say. Thank you again for having us all here.